Back in 2023, I published a video on the superstition or tradition that it's unwise to whistle at night, which I had found to be a recurring theme in Canadian folklore. That video became very popular because it's also a universal folktale, and it ended up becoming my fifth most popular video. In this video, I want to read some of the comments left on that video and others, describing other folkloric traditions on that topic that I didn't cover in that video, and a few personal anecdotes describing exactly what happens when you fail to heed that age-old, universal cultural taboo. So let's dive right in. So the first one is from Joanna Young, 2738, 11 months ago. That has happened in my family. We used to live next to the woods. My dad was out very late at night in the shed and copied a bird chirping. The bird chirped back every time he whistled. Then all of a sudden, he heard many birds chirping all at once. This scared him to rush back inside. He was so frightened he forgot to close the door all the way. We have a sliding door. He had a dream of a beautiful woman who tried to seduce him. When she got closer, her face was rotted, and she was clawing onto his arms. My mom woke us up and saw a shadow figure on the ceiling above my dad. And when it realized she was awake, it crawled out of the room and into the hallway. She woke everyone up to make sure we were all right, and that it didn't go into our rooms. That's when my dad confronted us with what had happened in his dream. After that, I never whistled at night. I never knew this was a thing, until I heard it on a Scary Stories podcast. That is a terrifying story, and that beautiful woman who turned out to be a rotting hag reminds me a lot of the succubus legend, which I think is an ancient Roman legend. I could be wrong about that. But it's a woman, like a demon, who will crawl onto a man's chest at night and drain out his life force. And I think some, scientists have tried to explain it away by dismissing it as a hypnagogic hallucination, which is what happens when you're kind of in the weird stage between sleeping and being awake, and you have hallucinations. I've had that before, and not visual ones, but I've had audio ones before. Have you ever had that? One time, and I find this happens if you ever take like a nap in the middle of the day, like not at nighttime, but it's like if you sleep at a weird time. So I was trying to go to sleep, and I heard this missile come and like blow up the neighborhood. And the rational part of me was like, that definitely did not happen, and I went back to sleep. But I've had that before, just huge explosions. And I got to say, one time, I won't get too personal on this, but there's a relative I have who has dementia, and for a couple of years, I looked after this person. And she had a tendency to wander at night, and since I liked working at night, I kind of volunteered in my family to stay up at night working next to her bed to make sure she didn't go outside or something. And so one night I'm working late at night, like 3 in the morning or something, and she comes out of her bedroom, and she looks at me and she says, "What was that noise?" And it had been completely quiet, there had been no noise. But she described hearing like a giant crash, like something big fell over and smashed, and I know exactly what she heard because I heard the same thing, and I was falling asleep. So if you've had experiences like that, feel free to share them in the comments. Next one is Being Me 16 meters, 1 year ago. I've always not whistled at night, because I'm native, and Grandma told me not to. Last night I accidentally whistled outside, and something answered me. I had very bad dreams last night. So another case of bad dreams after whistling at night and being visited by something that seems otherworldly, paranormal. Next one's Mobilis in Mobile, 1 year ago. It was late at night, and I was alone in my former house, which had mucho bad juju. I'd eaten some mushrooms. Oh boy, mushrooms again. Then something took over my mouth and made me say, flute mouth. I felt it was asking me to whistle. I whistle often and with vibrato every day. Freaked me out. Yeah, psychedelics freak me out. I've never done them. The idea of something playing with your brain so much, I don't know. Next one's American 1020, 1 year ago. From Samoa, and will confirm that whistling at night brings bad spirits and demons. I too. Next one is, okay, how am I going to say this? Diaga Nakomaran Katha Se, 3444. I apologize, I definitely pronounced that wrong. In Ireland, you don't whistle at night in forests, at night or on boats. In forests, it says that shouting or whistling poses a challenge to the Grauge, big hairy wild men, who tend the forest and mountains, at night, as it may attract the at night, as it may attract the Pukai, dark-colored, yellow-eyed, shape-shifting creatures that like to terrorize people, and the Slua, soul-eating creatures like Irish versions of the Wendigo that can fly, and on boats as it can upset spirits in the water, like the Murak, who will make the water rough and dangerous and attempt to sink the boat. Interesting. Next one's 39.5 PRS 1 year ago. 2012 was naturalist my first week in Everglades, and tail end of kayak group night, just getting ready to enter some mangrove tunnels. We were dozens of miles from nowhere, and I heard two human-like whistles, where there was no possible way there was anyone out there. I asked the others, and I think it went over their heads, because there was enough for them to worry about being sketched out already. In the Everglades, I guess that's Florida? So we heard whistling. There's no possible way there's anyone there. Reminds me of when I was doing my research for my 2018 book, Legends of the Nahanni Valley. One of the persistent legends is that there's an evil spirit in the valley, and everybody attributes this to the sound of whistling through the valley, which is, I guess, produced by the wind hitting the rocks or something in the narrow parts of the valley. I don't know, but that's a persistent rumor that there's an evil spirit because of that whistling. And I remember there was a guy, Anthony Roche, who's a half Inuit, I think half Mi'kmaq guy. Very interesting guy. I been in contact with him for a couple of years, but he used to work there in the Nahanni Valley as like a I'm not sure what you call it, but he like helped tend the park. It's a national park. This is up north between. It's in the Northwest Territories, kind of on the southern border of Yukon, and there's all sorts of weird legends about it that I cover in my book. But he was there, and he heard this. It wasn't a whistling; it was the sound of a. He says it sounded exactly like somebody, a human being, trying to imitate a raven. And he says that he knew exactly what it was because he'd heard ravens since he was a kid. He lived in the bush his whole life. And when he was a kid, he tried to do the same. Him and his brother would try to imitate raven calls. And that's exactly what this thing sounded like. And he was next to another guy, an older native guy, who was also, I don't know if the other guy was native, but he was an old hand tending to the park. And he looks to him for kind of an answer on what they had just heard. And he says, "Oh, don't worry. He's just letting you know he's there," without any explanation of what he is. So that kind of reminds me of that. Next one is Kiana War 2 years ago. Interestingly, the superstition was part of our culture as well. I'm from Pakistan, and I remember when I was a kid, I learned to whistle for the first time. My grandma told me very strictly not to practice whistling at night. I inquired what's wrong with that, and they said that it invites the jinns and all sorts of bad luck. So my understanding is that the jinns are like Islamic little demons in Islamic folklore. I never took it seriously, although I vividly remember the night I was playing in the courtyard with my cousins, and I was whistling for Elise, and suddenly someone right outside our home started whistling it back at us, but with pro-level proficiency, and in a very loud, haunting tone. We all froze for a moment, recalling what Grandma had told us, and then we all bolted back into the home, while screaming at the top of our lungs. I think it was some random dude fooling around, or was it? Or was it? I don't think so. Anyway, thank you very much for this video. This one took me back in time. If you'd like to watch this video without ads, please consider becoming a member of this channel and watching the ads-free version instead. You can do this on your phone or desktop by clicking the picture of my face and then clicking the join button to the right of the subscribe button. For only $2 Canadian per month, or about $1.45 US, you can watch my members-only videos and get an icon of a little Canadian monster beside your name every time you post a comment on my channel, which will change with the amount of time you've been a member. Since times are tough, I've decided to add a lower membership tier, which will give you access to my members-only videos for only $1 Canadian per month, or about 72 American cents. For my viewers in Madagascar who can't afford this, I apologize. Sorry for the interruption, and enjoy the video. Next one's Dimitri S. 6201, 2 years ago. Russians don't whistle at home or in the forest, as it might offend the Leshy. Now, is the Leshy, is that? I remember on one of my videos about horned humanoids, the Leshy was supposed to be something like that, like a horned, like a human, or like a deity, or a demon or something that lived in the forest and had antlers on its head. Let me just check it out. This is Wikipedia for what it's worth. Leshy is a tutelary deity of the forest in pagan Slavic mythology. As Leshy rules over the forest and hunting, he may be related to the Slavic god, Porwit. And it's got pictures of this kind of giant guy covered in pine cones walking through the woods. So maybe not the antlered thing I was thinking. Oh, never mind. This guy's got an antler here. Got antlers. Okay, so some forest deity from Slavic mythology. Sorry, let's continue with what he's saying here. The Ural-Mansi and other Siberian peoples also forbid whistling. There was an incident in the Urals when two people were at home in a forest village, listening to AM radio. The radio's frequency changed, and it began whistling, as it often did. Suddenly, the house shook from a powerful blow to the wall. The people froze in horror. The Leshy had arrived. A few minutes later, they came outside. No one was there. Children are even forbidden to play or make noise in the evening, otherwise the Leshy will come and take you away. So the house slap reminds me of, in a previous video on these comments that people leave on my channel, there's a guy from, I think, Nova Scotia saying that his house was slapped. Like, he called it a house slap, like it was something I should know about, like something that's like a common phenomenon. So interesting that this guy's talking about it here. Next one is off to south 1 year ago. This is a big comment. I know no one will ever read all this. You guessed wrong. But I spent 2 months hiking and living fairly primitively in the eastern Arizona backwoods, miles from civilization in any direction, and with a band of a few other individuals for a Navajo wilderness survival/therapy program. I'm from the American South, and I'm a rather loud, gregarious, and typically outgoing guy. I'm also a serial whistler, and was never raised on these superstitions the way the Navajo and other Arizona/Utah/Cali natives I was out there and had been raised. I was out there with and had been raised. That was probably the biggest culture shock to me, not the fact that we slept on the ground with no tents, or that we had to start fires with a bow drill and socket, or that we even drank disgusting water and dropped it with bleach to sanitize it. My band of walkers out there with me hated me because of how much I would whistle. Whether it was their personal pet peeve or superstition, I was asked to stop so many times by so many people out there that eventually all it took was a wordless look in my direction to shut me up. But the truth is, I couldn't help it. Like I said, I'm a serial whistler, thanks to being a woodwind musician of a few years. And plus everyone whistles while they work, where I grew up. It was just muscle memory, literally a habit that I'd never paid any mind, and one that I actually enjoyed it. It was very, very difficult to me to break that habit. But I remember well the experience that solidified it in my mind, in my head forever, that maybe these guys were onto something with their superstition. I'll try to spare the minor details because this has gone on long enough, but suffice to say that we egressed one area of mesas and plateaus down the side of basically a cliff face until we came to a sort of valley, with a river running alongside the valley's lush green pasture, and then curving to the left through a gap in the mountainside/cliff-faced border. We had never been to an area like this before. It was gorgeous, and extremely shielded and cut off because of the strange bowl shape of the valley, and the lovely creek or brook that ran through it. We forded said brook and selected a campsite on the other side, close to the river with plenty of space for all of us. We were laughing, talking, and being merry, with some people singing and joking until sundown, and into the night. I, goaded on by the night's festivities, was still whistling some of the tunes from earlier, and for some reason, I guess everyone was in too good a mood, nobody stopped me. I took my canteens down to the water's edge to refill after dinner, still whistling my songs, and that's when it happened. A rock the size of a honeydew exploded into the water in front of me. It was so shallow that it broke into pieces on the other rocks in the stream bed in front of me, and like I said, it literally exploded. I didn't see it coming down. It was that fast, but the angle of the spray, which had drenched my face, arms, and pants, indicated that the rock had been thrown at a flat angle, like a baseball, from across the river and to the left. I was absolutely stunned. I don't even remember if I made a sound or not. I just remember kind of freezing my neck into place, and every fiber of my being was devoted to listening around me. Listening for someone to come out of the bushes laughing, telling me it was a prank. Listening for someone bolting off into the night. Listening for anything. But nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Even the frogs had shut up. The only sound was the crack of a distant fire, and my bandmates' general confusion on what the sound had been. That's when I heard it. I still remember it so distinctly, and it still gives me chills. It was a whistle back. An indescribable whistle that went from contrabass to like higher than whatever's higher than a soprano. I don't know, my instrument never went that high, and then fell again to uncharted depths. Then it kind of bubbled, this thing from across the water. When I heard it burbling, every hair in my body stood on end, and I actually regained the use of my legs. I stood up so slow that my knee cracks sounded like gunshots to my ear. The burble had sounded like somehow cross between a gator's mating rumble and a howler monkey's bong rip sound that they make with that low screech that you see in documentaries. It's a weird explanation, but it pretty much is the only thing I can compare it to. I started to back away, because once I heard that development in the whistle, I knew in my soul whatever I was dealing with, or at least had a pretty good idea, and why I was dealing with it, or rather why it was dealing with me. I ran backwards uphill through a small thicket, all the way back to camp, having left my frigging canteens at the river. We went back to look for them in the morning, and found them about 50 yards upstream, up a tree, knotted around a limb. The ponderosa in question was too tall to climb before the first available branch, even if we made a pseudo-human ladder, so we had to try to break off the limb with the leather sling in a mountain of rocks. After about an hour, one of the trail walkers managed to nail the limb near the center, and send my canteens tumbling down 30 feet, still attached to the limb via their orange paracord lanyard. We had no idea how anything had gotten up there to tie it in place with a basic overhand knot, and furthermore, the most chilling part is that the canteen lids were closed, and that the canteens themselves still contained some water from last night's fill-up, about as much as there should be if they had been laying on their side open. I had not finished filling my canteens before the rock exploded in the middle of the riverbed to my left, and certainly hadn't screwed the caps back on before I had dropped them in utter shock and fright. After that, it was pretty easy to remember not to whistle at night for some reason. Wow, that's an amazing story. And the whistle from low to high is exactly the sort of thing that so many cultures say the wild man makes, especially on the west coast, the Sasquatch, and up north too. A whistle from low to high is kind of a universal thing that people say the Sasquatch does, especially native peoples. Very interesting story. Next one is Anon M7P 2 years ago. When I was at the cabin with family, I whistled once when me and my brother were walking by the riverbank. From above me, where I was, above me was a lookout point for helicopters to land, and it overlooks the riverbank. I heard whispers from there, and I told my brother to stop and head back to see who was there. I told my great-aunt, "Did you see anyone at the lookout point just now?" And she said no. And then it says, I changed some of the following to hide my identity. Background. Where my family cabins used to sit today, half of the cabin got burnt down. Used to sit a village. Bunch of native Canadians used to live. Many came to trade with the friends and family via canoes made of hide. But the sickness came and many died from it, and no less than half of them made it back to a small town by traversing downriver. After they recovered, many of my great-great family members went back to bury their fallen family members. The graves are somewhere in the bush nearby our cabin, and the survivors splits off to settle in other small towns. Today, some of my great-great family members are in their old ages, and I miss them. But I can imagine so many people at that time, and I'm happy to hear their stories. Next one's Blueberry Kush 420 2 years ago. Wow, I never heard of this, but it feels right. I've only ever had 2 experiences, and this reminds me of one when I was a teenager and with my friends riding our bikes at night. He had lived in a rural part of town with a lot of farms. We heard a very strange, almost bird-like sound coming from the trees, but unlike anything we have ever heard before. We stopped to listen to whatever this was. We were baffled, and for whatever reason, I then decided to mimic/mock the sound back at whatever it was. Then, dead silence. No leaves moving. No sound of movement by anything. Probably less than a minute later, my friend says something along the lines of, "Move, we need to leave now." His reaction terrified me. This was not someone who played pranks or messed around. He turned around and started pedaling as fast as he could, not knowing what was happening. I followed in a panic, also pedaling as fast as physically possible for me, my heart beating out of my chest like WTF, is there something behind me? Until we get back to his house. That is when he told me, after you made those sounds, there was a bunch of black shadowy figures approaching you, coming up to your bike. No, we were not high, and at this point had never done any drugs or alcohol in our lives. Very creepy. Next one's Rah Rah 9374 2 years ago. I'm a Canadian Cree Aboriginal. I was told not to whistle at night, because we would attract spirits, and also not to whistle at the northern lights, as they can pick us up and move us. I heard a story where a man was drunk walking home one night. He whistled at the northern lights. When he woke up, he was in a different province, further away from home. Northern lights are spirits. That is a legend up north, that the northern lights can take you away. I did a video on kind of legends of the northern lights. I'll link to that in the description in case you want to check it out. Next one's Athena Hera Laufason 367 2 years ago. As a Cree, ever since I've been a child, I've been taught not to whistle at night. It calls bad spirits to you. Sometimes something will whistle back, or sometimes something will come scare you. We're also not supposed to wander around at night, because that's when the dark spirits and bad spirits roam. We don't mess with the spirit world in any kind of negative way. So another Cree story. Next one's Kieran Devereaux 2 years ago. Navajo natives have similar legends about whistling at night, that it draws out evil spirits. My sister's boyfriend stayed on the reservation with friends when he was a teen, and not knowing about the superstition, whistled while they were at a campfire. He was told something bad would happen to him, and sure enough, hours later, his appendix burst, and he was lucky to survive. Some superstitions are just worth listening to. Interesting. Next one's Plumeria obtusa 2 years ago. A legend from the same continent that Canada, but probably obscured somehow. It's Brazilian Sacre Perere folklore. The Saki are mischievous forest spirits, sometimes referred to as demons, that trick travelers and farmers, and are attracted by whistling. They can do a list of pranks, from harmless to dangerous ones. He can burn the meals, annoy and braid the horse's mane, turn off the lights, knock the hats off travelers, and can also mess with the beaks of your vehicle. And it can also mess with the brakes of your vehicle. They appear in response to your whistling, or they just come whistling and spinning in a hurricane, yes, much like the Tasmanian devil, I think is what he's saying, to scare people and make things flying make a mess. They can be more than one at the same time, and they commonly appear in the form of a teenage/young adult black guy with a red pointy bonnet and he misses one leg. Wow, okay, that's interesting because that kind of evokes some kind of two types of dwarf stories from Canada. So the red hat thing is, I think it's a European thing for sure. I know the Kashubian Canadians from the Madawaska Highlands say that their dwarves have a red hat, like a red pointy hat. It's been associated with the fairies of Newfoundland. And I'm sure I've heard it in other traditions too, but it's like kind of a red pointy hat is like the classic dwarf picture is kind of a common theme in European and Euro-Canadian little people stories. And then the black person, the black thing, is like dwarves having black skin is a kind of a universal native legend. When I say universal, I just mean that it's kind of found across the continent, not in every tradition, but it's like a widespread belief. The Stonies believe that their dwarves in the mountains have black skin. And somewhere in the Canadian Shield, I want to say it's the Ojibwe or the Cree. There's stories. A lot of times the Cree and Ojibwe little people are like the little hairy guys that live by the river. But in some stories, they have black skin. I'll link to that video in the description. I did a video on it before. So anyway, this guy appears as a young black adult guy with a red pointy bonnet, and he misses one leg. The one-legged thing is another story that's been associated with Canadian dwarf legends. I'll link to my video on that in the description as well. The folklore is from a mix of indigenous Waorani tribe in the country south and African Brazilian cultures. But sakis are not invincible if you have a sieve in your hands, like a sieve, like for spaghetti or something, I guess. According to the folklore, throwing the sieve in the hurricane imprisons them for a while. They are said to live for 77 years, and when they reach that age, they turn into a Pinoporus sanguineus mushroom. There are versions of saki in Uruguay and Argentina, but the appearance and the legends aren't alike. Even in our country, we have variations of creatures that do the same thing, like capoeira and mantinta perera in the Northeast. Very cool. Next one's JMD Nelson, 4891, 2 years ago. I was always told not to do this, and after an owl appeared to me, I never whistled again at night. In my culture, owls landing on nearby rooftops and sitting still means a death in the family, and owls landing atop your home means a death in the household. I've seen 2 different owls on 2 different occasions, and have lost 2 family members since then. Never again will I whistle at night. And the association between owls and death is fairly common in native Canadian folklore. I'll post my video on owl legends, in case you want to check it out in the description. Next one, Cecil M. McLeod, 5631. I grew up with Cree culture, so I've known since childhood that you just don't whistle at night. But my boyfriend, on the other hand, didn't know. We're walking through the backwoods trail at night in freezing Canadian winter, and he whistles a little tune, then stops. Off in the distance, I hear the same whistled tune back. I'm like, creepy, but I won't say anything if he's not worried about it. He whistles again, and in the silence I hear the whistling again, but closer. I urge him to walk us through the trail faster, but he does continue his whistling, and so does the person/thing in the woods. And the thing is, you can't acknowledge it. So we keep walking, and finally at the end of the trail, when we're back on the lit road, I ask him if he heard the whistling too. He said no. I had to look up "Don't Whistle at Night" to know what the actual folklore reason was. I was told the Northern Lights story, which I guess just kind of includes general nighttime whistling as off-limits. So another spooky Cree story. Next one's Rusty Fox, 5261, 2 years ago. I've always been told never to whistle at night outside. I was told because it attracts supernatural beings and the ones you don't want to see. My partner was whistling while driving home from work one night and caught the attention of something that gave him nightmares until he used a smudge stick on himself and the car he was driving. So another thing that causes nightmares. Interesting. Next one's Justin R. 116, 2 years ago. I have horses and I live by a swamp. One night I went to the barn and I fed the horses and was petting them. I whistled a little, and thought nothing about it until about 10 seconds later or so, the horses just started panicking, and every frog and every cricket and the sound of all the swamp just went silent. I was very scared, because the nighttime went from being vibrant and alive to totally dead and silent. I quickly went towards the house with no problems, but the whole walk to the house I felt watched. Ooh, that is eerie. Next one is Rubum WQ7VU 2 years ago. I went through an incident. I was whistling while riding a bike around 12 a.m. Then a small whistle voice came very near to my ears. I thought somebody was whistling roadside, but there was no one. I was very sure about the whistle near my ears. It was a terrifying experience. Next one, Smart Cakes 303, 2 years ago. I'm an Aboriginal man from Australia, and yes, we have the hairy men spirits. We don't whistle at night either, or else it brings bad spirits because they hunt at night. My family and I have experienced bad things after whistling at night. We believe it very strongly. So I guess by the hairy men spirits, does he mean the Yowie? I'm not sure. Which is like kind of the Australian Sasquatch. Next one is Kesha V. Dogra, 7790, 2 years ago. A few months ago, a friend's brother was doing the hand whistle. Next morning, his grandmother died of a medicine overdose. I was even aware of such possibility. Next one's Universe Turtle, 2 years ago. I once went walking on the beach right outside of Ventura Harbor alone at night. Where's Ventura Harbor? So it looks like California, just northwest of Los Angeles. I don't know why, but I started whistling, and after about 10 minutes, I got the sense that I was being followed. A dark figure that was about my size seemed to be walking behind and adjacent to me. I wasn't afraid, kind of angry that someone would be so brazen. I waited for them to pass, then I turned back to the resort and walked a few miles back. Always felt weird about that person, like they weren't even a person, just a black reflection of me, trying to scare me for fun. Like a doppelganger, sounds like. Next one is Color Me Wonderful, 5187, 2 years ago. My cousins and I were smoking a joint outside when we heard a whistle from the bush. My one cousin don't listen, so she whistled after we told her not to. And sure enough, the whistle came closer. She didn't answer, but then we heard it whistle again, but closer. I left after that because ain't no way I'm getting taken out by Okla. They called me when I was driving home, saying how after I pulled out, the whistle was really close, like from across the street where the forest starts. So yeah, don't do that. Also, don't rub your knuckles together or whistle the northern lights, because they say they will take bits of your soul until they take all of you. So he calls it, I'm not getting taken by the Okla. What's the Okla? I can't figure it out. If anybody knows, let me know. Next one, Snurfy Burfy, 6247, 2 years ago. When I visited my friends in Paraguay, Central South America, they told me not to whistle during the night when near a forest. They said the pombero, kind of a little forest gnome/spirit, would whistle back. The further away it would sound, the closer he actually would be. It was funny how they were actually a little bit concerned when I did. The whole situation put me in a state of anticipation, so I really waited for something to whistle back. Every single bird sound was of course interpreted as potential whistling. Crazy how your brain plays you in a state of awareness. Next one's Creepypasta Archiver, 2 years ago. I was walking home at night, not whistling. I live in country/suburbs, and as I was walking there was whistling following me, tree from tree, and I didn't see anything flying from tree to tree. Felt like I needed to book it, and the front door was locked. I ran home and took the screen off my window and climbed through my window. Swore something would grab my legs. Next one, Zeke Woodroll, ZI9TZ, 2 years ago. Me and my buddies were drunk, walking through the woods, and eventually I was whistling and I heard something whistle back, and all of my friends were by my side, and heard it too. Nobody else was out there. On our way back, we got lost and heard someone hollering, thinking it was our friend who came to rescue us, and when we got to him, he explained he wasn't yelling, and he heard it too, and how he never goes out there after dark. Next one's Eric Palma, 55-9. I remember whistling one night, going camping, trying to make the time fly with my cousin. We were just whistling songs that we knew, and pretty much we had just to guess what the song was. But I remember hearing strange crying sounds. Me and my cousins were pretty spooked by it because we didn't know where it came from. It just sounded like crying from a distance, and we didn't hear nobody walking by us either, because the sound of leaves on the ground would have gave their position away if there was someone there. But we ended up just going somewhere else, because the vibe was just too weird there after hearing that, but it seemed like whistling made the entity sad or mad. We really don't know and don't want to find out. So the crying baby in the woods, it could have been a cougar, because they sometimes make sounds like that. But who knows? Next one's Kaklikful 2 years ago. Here in Brazil, we have the capoeira. We have the capora, a woodland spirit that haunts people who enter the woods. It is told that if you whistle, you invite her into your location. I have personally heard her whistling at night, while camping, and it's something I never want to go through again. My father too had an encounter where his hunting dogs got wrapped in some thin vines that wouldn't even be found in those parts of the woods. Something about this thing scares the hell out of me. So this is the second time that somebody mentioned the capora. I called it capoeira before. So it's a woodland spirit that haunts people who enter the woods. Very universal folktale. Next one's J.A. Angela's 6689, 2 years ago. Once I heard birds in one of our mango trees, singing distinct notes past midnight while I finished the laundry. I imitated their songs via whistling, and they sang back the same tune when I stopped. We exchanged whistling and their singing for a good 15 minutes. Half an hour later, when I was about to hang my laundry right beneath the tree, and mind you, it was a dark spot in our compound, suddenly it all grew very quiet. The bird chirps were gone. No more distant chatter from daily drunk neighbors, or rambling of the trucks on the nearby highway. No insects chirping, nor toads croaking. Even my dogs, who followed me everywhere, any time, were nowhere to be found. It felt like I was encased in a glass suddenly. My ears felt full, like some sort of pressure when you go down quickly from an elevated place. I felt heavy, and saw the shadows of fallen leaves moving when the leaves themselves did not. And then I felt a sort of panic inside me that told me to leave the spot and go somewhere lit. I half numb and very stiffly ran back inside, leaving everything outside undone. Inside, I started hearing the usual mechanical and organic hustle and bustle sounds of the living world in the dead of the night. It was quite the experience. Perhaps the birds sang to a deity of sort for protection from predators of the night. Perhaps I was granted the same peace they were given in exchange for the song. I don't know. So the silence reminds me of the one guy we just read about in the barn, how the entire swamp went quiet after he started whistling. Okay, next one. Matthew Dean, 8613, 2 years ago. One time, my dog ran off into the woods in the middle of the night, when we let her out to go to the bathroom. Me and my girlfriend went looking for her, and before we even left, she told me not to whistle in the woods. We heard a whistle, but it wasn't us. To this day, we still don't know what made that whistle, just that it wasn't a person. We were in the middle of the woods, pitch black, almost midnight, and nobody else was around. Next one's Red May, 2 years ago. I've whistled at night numerous times, but the only time I actually had something happen to me was about a year or two ago. It was either on Halloween of 2021 or 2022. My siblings were too old to go trick-or-treating anymore, and I was old enough to go by myself. I had my buddy on a call with me all night on my earbuds to make it more fun, and it definitely did. But it was about 10:30-ish, and most houses were turning off their lights, and my parents were telling me to come home because it was getting late. I was probably a 30-minute walk from the house, but when I was finally on my street, I was just whistling this eerie tune I would use to mess with my friends. It was kind of an inside joke, but I had stopped, and he commented on how I had messed up the ending, in which I informed him I had stopped about 30 seconds ago. Figured it was a delay, or he was messing with me. But what didn't help was that every light on the street was out, and a few seconds later, I remember hearing something, and it sounded like someone was running right behind me, so I broke into a sprint and booked it for my driveway. At one point, I had turned around just to see nothing was there, but I wasn't trying to be outside anymore. That's a creepy story. So this is a pretty young viewer, I guess. Next on Silver Candra 4275, 2 years ago. I feel like I've heard something like this as well, being from Europe. What I remember for sure is that as a kid, I once walked along a road that went through the cornfields near my house, and started to whistle as the sun went down, and suddenly felt like I was being watched. It got so bad, I sprinted all the way back across the stream that separated the fields from the houses, until I was at a friend's place, and asked if I could come talk to them for a moment, trying to find an excuse to get inside. There's just something about feeling the sudden gust of cold evening winds pick up as the sun goes down that makes me instinctually want to run far away from those fields. Next one's Martin Fernandez, 5526, 2 years ago. A few days ago, me and my family has gone to the beach. It was a very fun day. We had dinner at the shack, and around 9:30-ish p.m., we were leaving for home. While we were leaving, I was whistling a tune from the music that was being played in the shack, but then something shocking happened. The exact same tune I was whistling could be heard at a greenery beside us near the beach. It's kind of a thick plantation, not the woods though. Not only did I hear the same tune, but after a few seconds, I realized that it was exactly like my voice too. I was so engrossed in that whistle that I didn't even realize that I was the last person walking behind everyone else. As I was hearing the whistle, it seemed that I was walking really, really slow at first. I thought that it could be my phone that recorded me by mistake and played it after, but I never even opened the record app. The phone was in my pocket. It neither was a parrot, because they are nocturnal animals, nor are they found in any beach in Goa. Okay, so Goa is in India, but this guy has a Hispanic last name, and he's talking about parrots, which I thought were only in South America, but I must be wrong. There must be parrots in India. I could hear the whistling following me as I took the steps slowly. It was almost like I was in some kind of hypnosis and extreme anxiety. I snapped out of it, and turned my head and saw the family had reached pretty far. I shouted, and they came running back, asking what happened. As I spilled everything that happened, they angrily told me never to whistle again in the night, especially when near the woods or in a forest-like area. I still don't know who did that whistle. All I know is that I had lost complete interest in my surroundings and was lured into that shady greenery for a minute, probably the weirdest and scariest minute of my life. So the weird altered state of consciousness reminds me so much of these fairy stories that I've talked about before, where people get kind of lured into the woods, in a sort of trance, I suppose. Very spooky. Next one's Reincarnation 4674, 2 years ago. I live in Canada, and me and my sister were out in the park late one night and decided to whistle, and right amongst ourselves, we heard a whistle back. And it was just us two. We looked at each other, and knew neither one of us did it. So we ran right out of there. Next one's Beefaroni Bert, 2 years ago. I don't live in Canada, but I'll never forget the night me and my buddy were walking home in December of 2020. We heard a whistle that didn't sound like the wind coming from down the dark train tracks in our town. And because it had snowed prior to that night, the sound was very clear, blocked out by other natural noises. I whistled back, not thinking of the repercussions, and it went quiet. Not even a few seconds after that. It was closer than before. It almost had an aggressive tone to it. We were scared, and walked right back to the way we had come, and stayed at his place until the sun came up, about 3 hours. I looked into whistling, and found out that Skinwalkers are known to respond to whistling, and to never whistle at night if you hear it near you. So Skinwalkers, I don't know much about them. But if you're Navajo, and if that's what happens, if that's the folklore, let me know. Next one, Scarlet Rix Rose, 2 years ago. I was in a traditional healing camp, and a friend of mine accidentally whistled at night. Later on, me and my boyfriend heard drumming from the sweat lodge. I'm Cree from James Bay, northern Quebec. So James Bay is like the kind of the southern arm of Hudson's Bay. This was just last week, actually. These stories are true. Like 2 months ago, I was at my boyfriend's trapline camp, and I knocked on the wall above my head to mock my boyfriend telling me not to, because someone will knock at your door. Next thing you know, I woke up at 5 a.m. because someone or something knocked at the same spot I knocked on. Although it didn't scare me, I did feel a little creeped out and checked around my cabin. There were only 2 other people, and they were on the other side of the camp. Well, you're brave. That would really freak me out if that happened. Next one's Bad Cases of Stripes, 2 years ago. When I lived in Washington up on the Kitsap Peninsula one night, I was sitting on the 3rd-story balcony of my apartment. I kept hearing soft, weird noises and whoops coming from the woods, 40 yards away, and from the back of the building there. There was an impenetrable woodline of cherry trees and thickets. I could just feel a presence there, watching me. After an hour or so of nothing much happening, I had started to suspect it was a group of Sasquatch eating cherries. Being curious, I decided to whistle a pretty recognizable whistle as loud as I could, feeling safe from up there in the balcony. The second I finished, 3 of them, standing side by side, immediately started infrasounding me at the same time. I don't know what that means, infrasounding me. It felt like I was going to die instantly, and the pressure was so immense, more than anything I've ever felt before, like a projected dread that was pinpointed at me. I could feel exactly where their heads were in the woodline, while they were infrasounding. At the same time, the biggest male being took a big intake of air, and started sprint-stomping down the 45-degree hill and began breathing in his hyperventilating rhythm. I've never heard something so intense. Through these dense thickets he was ripping and shredding up the bushes like it was nothing. I could feel each and every stomp reverberate up to the 3rd story of the building. It was bipedal. It was absolutely insane. It sounded like an elephant running 45 miles per hour downhill, and stomping until he reached the bottom, in which I could still feel the stomps emanating from that far in the woods. Then it was silent. I was shaking and fully adrenalized, and the dread feeling went away quickly. Next one's Awesomeness Food Review Tours 9771, 2 years ago. I was in the Michigan wilderness hanging out in the cabin with the boys. I excused myself to piss outside when I began to whistle. I suddenly had the feeling I was being watched, very eerie vibes. Then I started to hear whistling coming from the woods. I listened for a second, realizes what's happening, and ran back inside. I did not sleep. Next one's Mactown, Mexican, 509, 2 years ago. So I grew up in Omak, Washington, Okanogan County, where the Colville Reservation is, and I have heard of the Stick Indians. They say they are shapeshifters, and they come and take you away in the night. If you whistle, an old native man told me that they're some kind of Wendigo, and another told me that they are simply Sasquatches, and the reason they come for you is that they are nocturnal and communicate with whistling. So one was deep in the woods at night and whistled. It may attract Sasquatches and may attack or abduct you. This is what I believe the Stick Indians are. I don't believe they're a spiritual ghost or monster or demon. I believe they are Sasquatches. That was my impression too. I didn't know that they were supposed to be ghosts. I was also told that you can smell the Stick Indians, and if you do, you can light a cigarette and leave it on the ground for them as an offering. Growing up there on the res, I have heard countless stories of Sasquatch sitting at Omak Lake and around old St. Mary's Mission. This woman who said she went to school there in the 70s said her and her 3 of her friends snuck out of the mission at night to go do some drinking, and they were going there to the usual spot, and they noticed a campfire. She said they thought it was other kids who snuck out, and she said they came to the top of the hill, looked down in the gully. She said they say over 10 Sasquatches, all sizes, walking around in a circle around the fire. Next one's Wistow, 1006, 2 years ago. I went camping on the back roads of one of our res one time. Hid my tent in the tree line next to an old road. Around 1 or 2 a.m., a person was walking up there whistling. 3 short, shrill whistles, and 1 long, low one. Doesn't sound too odd, right? This was a very old wagon road leading to the wilds. Nothing out there for miles. No houses or amenities. No idea why this person was out and about at this time of night. Almost pooped my shorts, shaking with fear. Didn't even think about my rifle or anything. Just the terror of this silhouette slowly shuffling past, heading into the hills. Man, I'm lame. No, I'd be scared too. That sounds terrifying. Next one's J.P. Breezen, 1277, 2 years ago. Hi, I'm from Aruba. A couple weeks ago, arriving late from work, I whistled. My dog, who was in the backyard, to come to the front yard so I could tie him up, so I could go open the gate, so I could enter my car to the front yard. As soon as I whistled, I remembered thinking I have done something wrong. I shouldn't have whistled. A few minutes later, I was inside fixing myself a sandwich. Started hearing an unnatural whistling coming from the backyard. My small dog, who was also in the kitchen, started staring at the backyard window that was open. I was told over the years countless times by my wife and elders not to whistle at night. That day, I found out why. Next one's the main character 93. There's a patch of woods out in Athens, Texas, that's rumored to be haunted by evil spirits due to occult activity in the area. We went out there one night, and when we were teenagers to get a bit of the spooks, we heard whistling coming from one direction, and we all got really quiet. It came in bursts, short and tuneless. We thought someone might be messing with us, but then it started coming from the opposite direction. We decided to nope out of there, and the whole way we could hear it swapping back and forth around us. It was at this place called the Monkey Cage. Next one's Meredith Grubb, 4497, 2 years ago. I live in the Appalachian Mountains, and absolutely this is a thing here. You don't whistle, hum, or sing at night. If something smacks your house at night, you don't go out. Also, if you hear your name called or crying at night outside, you don't call out or go to it. So another reference to the house slap. Next one's Ulfskin, 1458, 2 years ago. I was out in the woods at night with a group of people in Wisconsin, near an old Indian site contained on private property, and we heard someone whistling. We would call back, and whatever it was whistled back. After a little while, it seemed to have moved closer to the path we were on, but somehow made no noise out in the thick underbrush. We stopped responding and made our way out of the area, and you could hear it whistling from where we were. I've spent a great deal of time in the woods, and I have never really heard anything like it since. It did not whistle like a bird would, but rather like something trying to imitate a natural whistle, like a human. The first thing that came to my mind were Stick Indians, who were said to dwell in the woods and whistle to draw you into the woods, and to them. I heard reports that a number of other strange things happened on the property. So there are Stick Indian legends in Wisconsin. Didn't know that. Next one's Jacqueline Dara, 2 years ago. My family and I were in Emir, BC. I know I pronounced that wrong. I don't know how to say it properly, but people have called me out for mispronouncing Emir, BC, which is a very small town in the Kootenays. It used to be a mining town. My mother lived there as a child in the early 60s, and we liked to visit it when in the area. There is an old graveyard that is on the side of a hill and up a old road on the outskirts of town. It's not marked, and is a little tricky to find. We decided to go for a spooky walk to find it one night, but got a little lost. My sister and I split off from the group and ended up way ahead of everyone, surrounded by woods and darkness. Suddenly, I heard a whistle coming from the woods, and we both stopped dead. It sounded eerie, like something mimicking a person. We didn't call out, but listened. Suddenly, the whistle rang out again, but this time was a lot closer. We did not hear anything moving in the forest, so this was really startling. Immediately, my sister grabbed my arm and said, "Oh, hell no," and we started briskly walking back to the group down the road, and told them all we were not going any further. Safe to say we didn't find the graveyard that night. Wow, I can't imagine how scary that would be, because I've been lost in the woods before, in the daytime, and that's scary enough. At nighttime, I imagine it'd be way worse at nighttime. I've almost had that happen, but luckily found my way back. But to be lost in the woods at nighttime, hearing something that's mimicking a person in the woods, that would be too much for me, I think. Okay, so here she is again, Jacqueline Dara, 2 years ago. It looks like she's responding to somebody else's comment on her comment. I've never heard of Skinwalkers or anything like that at the time, nor my sister. I was more curious, but she immediately wanted to leave. I was quite young, and she had a lot of experience traveling, and her sense for danger was keener. Something was just so off. Aside from the already scary setting, that area is very dark, and the stories I'd hear from my aunties and uncles were so scary. Fun fact, Slender Man was filmed in the town where we live, Emir, BC, and my family would actually see a tall, dark figure in the woods that they call the Top Hat Man. Keep in mind this was in the early 60s. What are the odds that they filmed the very movie there years later? Oh, and here's another reply to another comment by Jacqueline Dara. She says, "Yes, it's almost like a taunting whistle. It was so unsettling. We all left immediately. To be honest, we thought it was scarier to think that it was a person all the way out there, alone, following us in the darkness. Supernatural or not, it was not something we wanted to mess with." No kidding. Next one's Mountain Man 530, 2 years ago. I never heard a "don't whistle at night," but I accidentally did one night back in '91 north of Carolitos, California, in the Redwoods. Something started walking towards me in the night. When it got 60 feet away, I fired a shot through the tent. Silence for 7 seconds. Then it walked away at a slow pace. No moon, pitch black. What was it? Next one's Henry Fonseca, 4198, 2 years ago. I'm from South Texas, born in '83. Know from living in Gonzales County, know all about the lechuza from experience. So lechuza is like a Mexican witch that's supposed to take the form of an owl. Family member encounters that are all too real was part of one I will never forget. It was in the early 90s. I actually seen the wingspan of a lechuza swoop down above our home when one chased a family member to our home one night. My uncle was leaving a house party when he told the story while catching his breath. When he ran inside, he told us what happened. He whistled at one that he attracted. It was in a huge pecan tree, outside of a church that was down the street from where we lived. I'll never forget that. We all huddled inside, cut the lights off in the house, as this thing threw stones at our tin roof, taunting us to come back outside, which none of us did. We all called it a night after that. True story. My uncle actually pulled a pistol he had and shot at this thing. That did nothing but piss it off and made it chase him. We lived off a gravel road. We had a screen door in front of our main door. Partially open is when we heard the shots coming from down the road. I heard my uncle's footfalls from hitting the gravel running towards our house, yelling for us to open the door. That's when we ran to the porch to see this thing chase him inside. The wingspan was nearly as wide as our home. Wow, I didn't know they were supposed to be that huge. Well, that is a dramatic story. Next one is Clockwork on the Window 2 years ago. I was whistling the other night, walking home in Peterborough, Canada, and happened to look up to see an owl staring at me in a tree. We just looked at each other for 5 minutes, and then it flew away right over me. Something about the way it stared at me through the dark branches was pretty creepy for sure. So another connection between owls and whistling at night. Next one's Nary 1412, 2 years ago. I had heard that one of my uncles was out walking the dirt road home. He was fairly past a light buzz when he saw the lights above and began to whistle. Okay, so maybe she's talking about the northern lights here. There he claimed the lights came back down and picked him up and dropped him from only 5 feet from the ground. Crazy, honestly. I also live in northern Alberta. So another story about the northern lights picking people up. But this is a second-hand encounter. And the last one is Jerry Robbins' B2T 1 year ago. I heard from a friend in Aberdeen, Washington, that you aren't supposed to whistle in the woods at night because the stick people will get angry and will do harm or possibly kill you. The natives over there take this very seriously. There is also supposedly an old graduation picture from the logging boom in the very late 19th century. I was told in the background there are 20 to 30 stick people posing for the photo from the edge of the woods, like they were there as part of the graduation, but no one really knows. They were small, like 1.5 feet, and they appear to be wood, like tiny ents. Anyone ever hear of them? I'd like to learn more. Okay, so that's the first time I've heard of stick Indians being like dwarves. So they're supposed to be spirits, or in other traditions, like Sasquatch, like wild men, or in other traditions, like little ents. So those are some of the best comments I found on personal experiences with the consequences of whistling at night. If you've ever had something like that happen to you, feel free to share your story in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.